man I've ever known. I was truly honored to be blessed with such an amazing grandfather. He was supportive, kind, and very proud of all of his grandchildren. I remember the weekend visits to Grandma and Grandpa's house. I would go up and always see Grandpa sitting in his chair by the window of the table. I would run in to give Grandma and Grandpa a big hug, and after all the readings and the course of readings, Grandpa and I would sit down to play reading cards. My goal every time was to beat Grandpa or catch him cheating. But Grandpa was too creepy for me, and I could never catch him until the game was over or he already left. Grandpa was a very sports kind of person, therefore I thought that him coming to a grandpa battle was not very likely. But I was wrong. Grandpa made it to every single grandpa battle since I started 12 years ago. He was my #1 fan, which meant so much to me. When I finished this show, my first question would be, what did Grandpa think? Because no one else's opinion matters more than his. When I'm dancing, I will be asking for him. My grandpa taught me a lot of things growing up. He tried to teach me some German words, but laughed at me when I didn't say them right. He would help me play baseball, teach me new card games, take me curling, let me help him in the garden, and even let me paint his nails. But aside from all those, Grandpa taught me many life skills. Grandpa was always polite and kind to everyone, which taught me good people skills. He wouldn't get mad about losing, which taught me good sportsmanship. He would always be laughing and joking about something, which taught me good humor. But most importantly, he would always show me how much he loved me and cared for me, which taught me love. Just imperative, Grandpa, we all love you so much, you will never be forgotten.
How many times did a conversation with Arnie begin with, "Hey, Arnie, how are you doing?" His reply, "Without." As a child, I didn't understand what that meant, only that it made people laugh. As a teenager, it was, "Yeah, Arnie, that's just gross." As an adult, it makes me smile every time I hear it, because that's part of who Arnie was. I don't remember exactly the first time I met Arnie, but as a little girl who believed in fairy godmothers, I vividly remember the romance. Quite simply, Arnie and Myrna were my version of Lady Di and Prince Charles. Only Arnie didn't have those big ears. He switched them for a nose. But still, he was Prince Charming. To me, he was the most handsome, dashing, and daring, better than a movie star guy that I had ever seen. And the best part was that he was at our house a lot. Because Myrna, my mom's little sister, who's always felt more like my big sister than my aunt, was this Prince Charming's true love. My sisters and I would waltz around the living room to the romantic music of Myrna's 45, like the songs had been written solely for Myrna and Arnie. Around the world I searched for you, and I give to you, and you give to me. True love, true love. Life inside a fairy tale. My brothers and sisters and I, all 5 of us, were equally enchanted with this hero, Arnold Weber, who couldn't have come into our lives, who couldn't have picked a better time to come into our lives. This Raymore superstar hockey player was fun and funny. He teased and played and spent time with us. That's why when we were ecstatic when Myrna and Arnold decided to live happily ever after. Our Uncle Arnie, the rocket superstar, so opening and welcoming and engaging was his personality, that very soon he came to be called Uncle Arnie by a lot of our friends and classmates as well. Sometimes that was okay, and sometimes it was quite annoying, because did I mention that he was a hockey superstar? Well, at those Rockets games, when he'd make a great play, those kids would yell, "Yay, Uncle Arnie!" And every time I'd have to remind them he was not their uncle. He was mine. A few years passed. Arnie and Myrna had 4 children and were living on a farm at Breaker, which became known to many as South Farm. You know, right after I wrote that sentence, I realized how some of us simply assumed ownership of Arnie and Myrna's culture. Even just 3 days ago, in talking to Marley, a cousin from Edmonton, I asked her where she was staying, and she replied, "At the farm." It's hard to say when that ownership thing happened, but it's very easy to see why it happened. Arnie and Myrna's home was the most welcoming and hospitable home I have ever seen. Arnie's neighbors and friends, and nieces and nephews, and the nieces and nephews' neighbors and friends were all welcome to come and stay at the farm. And stay we did. And the wonderful, marvelous times we had. Arnie had a knack of turning the most mundane chores into an adventure. You just never knew when you might be squirted with milk, or hit with a pail of water, or have a handful of fresh honey-coated beeswax slided down your back, or turn to see a headless chicken running your way. Arnie actually took pride in his ability to scare the ever-loving wits out of you. Sneaking up behind you, or jumping out of a dark corner in the barn or in the basement, screaming, "Look out!" while he was throwing anything at you that you might think was a mouse, or suddenly appearing in your face with his eyelids turned inside out. As his granddaughter Brittany put it, the things nightmares are made of. Yet we labeled this as fun, and could hardly wait until next time to do it all over again. My brother Brian commented yesterday, it was only funny until someone got hurt, and then it became hilarious.
The first time I met Arnie, it was an embarrassing encounter. I was at bat for the Punta Orioles. Arnie was the opposing pitcher. I was thinking, I can pound this old, slow guy. Little did I know, he would have me chased after 2 pitches. The third and final pitch was his infamous changeup. I nearly broke my back trying to hammer it. As I walked back to the dugout, I looked over, and Arnie had this little smirk on his face, and my teammates, they're all laughing hysterically on the bench. Right then, I really did not like him much. When I became part of the family, I got to know Arnie in a completely different way. I always looked forward to the family gathering up at the farm. They were so much fun. Always lots of laughter. Always lots of food. Always lots of card games. Especially 500. Arnie was a champion card player. He could read people like a book. He somehow remembered every card that had been played. His opponents were seduced by his friendly nature and conversation, and were oblivious to his aggressive nature. He could tell you who was holding good cards and who wasn't. He knew how to lure the opposition into making mistakes. However, if you were his partner, weren't paying attention, and and made the fatal mistake of playing the wrong card, you found out about it pretty quick. With the evil eye and the head shake. I learned this was serious business and you had better stay focused. Thanksgiving was one of my favorite times at the farm. It meant the annual football game. Arnie loved every second of it, and in spite of being oldest participant, he could run as fast and as long as the rest of us, even though he had 20 to 30 years on most of us. He was absolutely amazing. It wasn't until years later that I grew to know Myrna and Arnie as well as my own loving dad. One September, they agreed to let me live with them, at least until Christmas. 4 years later, they had me feeling like I belonged there. Arnie and I shared a passion for sports, except Arnie was stampeders, I was riders. Arnie was Leafs, I was Habs. And he hated Montreal, most often referring to them as the damn frogs. So, one spring, when the Habs were still in the playoffs, and of course, the Leafs were long gone, I placed a large Canadian sign in a corner of his front window. It was not visible from inside the house, since the drapes covered it. However, the neighbors and everyone passing by saw it and had a great laugh. It was a week before Arnie found out it was there, and he was slightly ticked for a few minutes. Not so much because it was a half sign, but because someone got one over on it. And then he starts to laugh, because Arnie loves a good prank. So right there is another thing I admire about Arnie. He loves to give it, but he can also take it, and with a huge laugh at himself. The last year I was there was when Arnie's health problems started to surface. He had several procedures on his heart, and his diabetes was giving him problems. Over the next few years, Arnie had his ups and downs, spending time in the hospital and nursing homes in Moose Jaw, Regina, and then Kew Park. Then, remarkably, after almost 2 years of believing he had dementia, Arnie made an astounding turnaround. In fact, Arnie had a perfectly wonderful summer, visiting, playing cards, joking, singing, enjoying the Weber reunion, and of course, teasing everyone and anyone who came near. Yep, the old Arnie was back. Near the end of September, he was doing so well that the family was considering a reassessment. But soon after, Arnie developed an unrelated health issue and ended up in the Regina hospital for a battery of tests.
So, on October 7th, when the family was gathered in Arnie's hospital room, and the oncologist came in to deliver some bad news, he began by saying, "Hello, Mr. Weber. I'm Dr. So-and-so. I need to explain your test results to you. But first, tell me, how are you doing?" Without. The doctor didn't know how to respond, so he tried another approach. He motioned towards Myrna and asked Arnie, "Is this your wife?" "She's my clock." Obviously, medical school had not prepared this man for Arnold. He turned to Myrna and asked, "Is he always like this?" "Yes, Pretty much, said Myrna.
Yep, pretty much. That's how I always knew Arnie, and that's how he remained. The news that day was not good. He returned to the nursing home, this time in palliative care. But to me, this very much sums up Arnie and what made him so special. His positive outlook on life and his unfailing sense of humor. He was fun to be around. He made people laugh. Over the years, and especially the past few days, whenever I thought of Arnie, I smiled. And the best part is that I always will.
There are so many Arnie stories. Most of you here likely have your own Arnie story. So yes, we will remember Arnie with good stories and smiles and when we're doing without. But most of all, I will remember him with a very deep sense of gratitude and a whole lot of love.